Well, it's all over now, folks, except for the voting at the Supreme Court, which could be as soon as tomorrow. The health care decision could be finalized tomorrow. We won't know about it till late June, but they already know what they're going to do. The oral arguments rarely change anything, but we'll find out. Great to have you back here, folks. Rush Limbaugh, the Excellence in Broadcasting Network, Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. Telephone number 800-282-2882. The email address lrushbaugh@eibnet.com. For all intents and purposes, the Supreme Court's going to vote tomorrow or soon on whether to strike down Obamacare, whether to strike down the mandate, or to uphold it as constitutional. There won't be much discussion of the vote, as I have learned. They don't debate. They don't discuss cases with each other. They write. They circulate their opinions. To whatever extent those are persuasive, the justices might change their minds, but it rarely happens. In fact, throughout the media today, you'll find constant references to Kennedy and maybe one of the conservatives changing his mind. You never read about the liberal justices being forced to or being asked to rise above it and change their minds. But it has been an incredible week. This has been just an amazing week, folks. I was reading a blog post today at Powerline, Stephen Hayward, who has written some books on Reagan. We've interviewed Stephen Hayward here at the program for the Limbaugh Letter, the most widely read newsletter in American politics. And I was going through this, and one of the themes that we've had this week is what is real, who is really smart, who is it really engaged, who is it we are really up against. This has been an eye-opening week for so many people. The idea that liberal elites are smarter and run rings around other people intellectually was exposed as an abject fraud this week. The idea that they're open-minded, the idea that they're even aware of competing points of views, that was blown up as well. The level of arrogance that they possess is such that there are no opposing ideas except when they are confronted with them. But would you like to know something? Every argument advanced by Paul Clement, who was arguing for our side at the Supreme Court, every question asked by a justice, every answer, every point about Obamacare that was made in opposition to it has been made for years. You could read the briefs in the appellate cases. You could have listened to this program. You could have read any number of blogs. It's no secret. Conservatism is no secret. Constitutional Americanism is no secret. It's out there. Anybody in the world can discover it. I am still blown away by how utterly shocked people like Jeffrey Toobin and others in the liberal media were that it went the way it went. They were shocked out of their clothes, folks. They were stunned. Just this week, Jeff Toobin was on Charlie Rose predicting a slam dunk for constitutionality. And all it took was 90 minutes of oral arguments, and he's in a full abject panic as though he had never heard any of these objections to Obamacare. And is out, and he's then scaring Wolf Blitzer to death. Poor Wolf, I think they had to take a day off one day this week to deal with his shock over the fact that this thing has some problems. Well, they did. I mean, it was Toobin was out there talking to Wolf Blitzer one day, and Wolf carried his shock and dismay into the night. The next day, Toobin was put on with Don Lemon, and Wolf wasn't anywhere to be found. So he might be wearing a little white jacket somewhere here until he gets his equilibrium back. Really, It's eye-opening. They're a bunch, I really want to be serious about this. They're a bunch of overhyped know-nothings. Really a bunch of overhyped know-nothings who do not have an expansive view of the world. They're in a prison that's created by their own conceit. They're in a prison that is the result of their own arrogance. And they live in a place where there is no reality. And that's what hit them right between the eyes this week. They were confronted with reality which they regularly, purposely avoid. They have instead constructed in their minds this socialist utopian, idyllic dreamland, fantasy land that doesn't exist, can't exist, hasn't exist, won't ever exist. And when they are confronted with the reality of anything up against their own constructs, it is the equivalent to you and I being surprised by a bear in our backyard. That's the last thing you expect to happen. Now, let me go through some of Hayward's piece here to try to be illustrative of what I'm talking about. The terrible, no good, very bad month for the left. It's typical. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll take excerpts here. It's typical for politically engaged people to note the weaknesses and defects, the defects of their own side. It's typical for politically engaged people to note the weaknesses and defects of their own. No, that's what's remarkable. They don't. There are no weaknesses. There are no defects until they're confronted with them. They do not conceive them. While at the same time overestimating the strength and prowess of their opponents. That's us. That's what we have always done. And hopefully no more. There's no reason to ever feel inferior to these people. There's no reason to grant them superior or elite status in any way. Like the point I made yesterday, is it virility? It's virility. They're dumping on this guy. The libs are dumping on this guy, the Solicitor General who argued for the government. They're dumping on this guy left and he is from Columbia University Law Review. That equals, in their world, Einstein. That equals, just like Obama was Harvard Law Review, this guy, Columbia University Law Review. That's Einstein. That's Mensa. That's as smart as you can be. And we see that he's not anywhere near as smart as you can be. They're dumping on him for a very simple reason. They refuse to admit that he had nothing to defend. He was trying to defend the indefensible. He's trying to defend a piece of legislation. Look at what Scalia said yesterday. Antonin Scalia asked the Associate Solicitor General, "Do you really want us to go through these 2,700 pages? You really expect the court to do that? You expect us to give this function to our law clerks?" They do. This is exactly who the left is. They've got a 2,700-page health care bill, and they expect the court to go through it and determine what's okay and what isn't, to give it its final imprimatur. And they know they count on Sotomayor, Ginsburg, Breyer, and Sotomayor, Ginsburg, Kagan, who ought to have recused herself. That's another thing we discussed, but she shouldn't even be there because she helped put together the arguments that were made yesterday and this week. By really? Yeah. She shouldn't be there. In an ethical, sane world, she shouldn't even be there. So they get 2,700 pages. And Scalia, you expect us, the court, to go through these 2,700 pages? Well, folks, here's the reality. Somebody's going to have to. If it ever is fully implemented, somebody's going to have to go through those 2,700 pages. Every time you go to the doctor, somebody's going to have to consult those 2,700 pages. And you know who it isn't going to be? It isn't going to be your doctor. And it isn't going to be your insurance company. It's going to be people like those who argued for the government at the Supreme Court. Incompetence on parade. Nameless bureaucrats who thrive on power over average people. They're the ones that are going to be going through those 2,700 pages if this is declared fully constitutional. Somebody's going to have to go through them. It's an outrage. It's a boondoggle. It is an absolute disaster. Kennedy expressed surprising skepticism that the court was competent to make health policy. He said, I don't understand your position. He was talking to Edwin Nealer, who is the Associate Solicitor General. I don't understand your position. Are you saying we have the expertise here on the court to decide which provisions should stay in and which should be thrown out if the mandate's overturned? It seems to me, Kennedy said, it can be argued at least to be a more extreme exercise of judicial power to keep the rest of the law intact than striking the whole thing. I just don't accept your premise. He said, you mean we have the expertise to decide which provisions in these 2,700 pages should stay in and which should be thrown out if we get rid of the mandate? It seems to me that can be argued at least to be that's a more extreme exercise of judicial power than just getting rid of the whole thing. And he's right. Stop and think what the regime asked them to do. And it's quite telling. They wanted the Supreme Court to go through this thing page by page and rubber stamp it. Separation of powers, anyone? But these justices, that's not their job. They're not the experts here. And the point is that if this thing is fully implemented, not one expert will be going through those 2,700 pages. Bureaucrats will. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, or some nameless, faceless bureaucrat, not your doctor, not your nurse, not your surgeon, not even your evil insurance company is going to be going through those 2,700 pages. Somebody's going to be going through them. And Scalia said, I don't want to do it, and I'm not going to let you make my clerks do it. And Kennedy said, I'm not taking that much power away from the Congress. And the regime lawyers are shocked because they can't believe that government officials, judges, would reject this kind of opportunity to exercise power. Because to them, that's what this is all about, the immense power in those 2,700 pages. And here we had judges say, I don't want that power. And they're shocked. Somebody is going to have it if this thing survives. Somebody is going to be going through those 2,700 and it isn't going to be you. It isn't going to be your doctor. It's not going to be your nurse. It's not going to be anybody responsible for your treatment. It's going to be a bureaucrat deciding whether or not you are worth it. Some utopia